cells and back, dealing with all things vascular and cardiac. Capillaries, arteries, and veins, all I'm saying, the circulation is the name of the game. Taking blood from the heart to the cells and back, dealing with all things vascular and cardiac. Capillaries, arteries, and veins, all I'm saying, the circulation is the name of the game. Let me start from the heart, cause that seems smart. It's not hard to see, that is the most important part. The first step is to gather up oxygen, sends blood to the lungs, back to the heart again. Next up, we'll talk about the arteries. They take blood from the heart to where it's gotta be. The biggest artery, the main transporter. Right next to the heart is called the aorta. Taking blood from the heart to the cells and back, dealing with all things vascular and cardiac. Capillaries, arteries, and veins, all I'm saying, the circulation is the name of the game. Taking blood from the heart to the cells and back, dealing with all things vascular and cardiac. Capillaries, arteries, and veins, all I'm saying, the circulation is the name of the game. Hey. From the arteries into the capillaries, all your organs and muscles become the beneficiaries of all the oxygen and nutrients they bring through very tiny vessels inside of the body tissue. And now the oxygen's gone, but first we got some carbon dioxide waste to take on, and it's into the vein and back to the heart again, and let the whole cycle start again. Taking blood from the heart to the cells and back, dealing with all things vascular and cardiac. Capillaries, arteries, and veins, all I'm saying, the circulation is the name of the game. Taking blood from the heart to the cells and back, dealing with all things vascular and cardiac. Capillaries, arteries, and veins, all I'm saying, the circulation is the name of the game. Hey. Taking blood from the heart to the cells and back, dealing with all things vascular and cardiac. Yay, yay.
Thanks so much everyone for watching. We've got an epic lineup tonight of speakers. We've got an awesome panel here. Amazing group of functional doctors, technology, activists for a leap forward in medicine.
This is a great gathering.
You know, our goal is to make it easy for practitioners to learn in community. There's a lot of community happening tonight. I want to say welcome to all of the communities that are watching at home. This ecosystem that has been set up by the meetup groups, we believe will be the future ecosystem of this evolved primary care network that we are looking to develop, and it all revolves around you. There's an exponential potential to the future of medicine. This is an allopathic conversion machine that we have just created. And it has exponential potential because it can be seen by 1 billion people at no extra cost. That's the beauty of the internet.
Welcome to the Functional Forum, live from Detroit, Michigan. Thanks for joining us in the charge to accelerate the evolution of medicine. Please welcome your host, James Maskell.
So great to be here with all of you. Detroit in the house. It's really great to be here in Michigan. My first time ever in Michigan. And thank you so much for making it all out tonight. We've got an amazing show and lineup for you, talking about the evolution of cardiology. And thanks so much for being here with us tonight. So I just want to give a shout out first and foremost to all of the meetup groups that are meeting all around the country and all around the world. We are, one of the biggest goals that we have here at the Evolution of Medicine is to create a community of practitioners in every zip code in the country and also every zip code around the world. And so it's really exciting to see some of the innovation that's happening in the meetup groups. So just to give you a little look here, on the right-hand side, I want to give a shout out to Long Island, Amy and Mike and the rest of the team out there. This is their meetup group here. So they've got a networking event before. Dr. Regina Drews is doing a talk, and then they're going to be watching the show. This is a new practice that's decided to put the Functional Forum meetup in their practice. Great idea. Great idea if you want to meet practitioners and to build community. This is a group in Sweden. So this was them at the last meetup group. So it's really cool to see practitioners coming together all over the world. And then also awesome to see this is the Auckland, New Zealand Functional Forum meetup is starting to grow as well. So this is a worldwide movement. There's a recognition that medicine is failing at dealing with the chronic diseases. that plague society and plague the payers that are paying for them. And so it's really exciting to see this worldwide meetup. And I put this triangle in here because there's an emerging triangle that I see of what it takes to run an effective, consistent meetup. So what you need is three things. You need a practitioner, someone who can, if a new doctor arrives to the meetup, they can answer those questions, deal with the clinical side of things. Two is you need a sponsor. You need someone with an economic incentive to get people in the room, to call people and get them there. And part of the reason why we're completely supplement and lab neutral is because we realize that, let's face it, the supplement and lab companies sort of benefit the most from way more functional doctors. And so they are starting to sponsor the meetups all over the country and all over the world. And if you have those two things and you have a sponsor, then you can get a consistent venue. And one of the things we've seen is that if you can find a venue where their business has an economic incentive to have people in the room, like the Green Space Cafe in Detroit, Michigan, that can be a great starting point, or a Pilates studio or a community center. There are meetups happening all over the country and all over the world. So big shout out to Portland and Atlanta and all the great places that are doing the meetups. And this is a level of innovation that we love to see, and it's exciting to see that. All right, so we're going to talk about the evolution of cardiology tonight. And luckily for us, there's already been quite a lot of effort to evolve cardiology. Anyone heard of Dr. Dean Ornish and his program? Right, yeah, big round of applause for him. So last year I did an interview with him. Right now in America, if you have cardiovascular disease, you can see a doctor who's been trained in Dr. Ornish's program, and it's good for the patient. It's available on Medicare and Medicaid. It's available on most of the insurances. It pays really well for the doctors that actually deliver the program. And this is evolved cardiology right here. You know, Medicare pays for a yoga teacher. Medicare pays for a nutritionist. Medicare's paying for that in Dr. Ornish's program. For 30 years, he's been on the front edge of the coalface making this happen. And so, the Dean Ornish Intensive Cardiac Rehab program, that's the end of the show. That's evolved ecology. We can all go home, right? Well, not really. And the reason is because in order for practices to pull off this model, you have to be a big cardiology group. Right? You have to have a ton of patients with cardiovascular disease, because the whole point is you see them in a group and you develop community. And what we're going to see tonight is that preventive cardiology might not always be best to be done by cardiologists, right? There are other providers, integrative and functional doctors, that can be providing preventive, predictive cardiology earlier on in the cycle before you ever need to think that you need to get to a cardiologist. If 90% of strokes are preventable and reversible, we're getting there too late if we're waiting for them to get to a cardiologist. So big respect for Dr. Ornish and everything that he's done to get us to this point, and a great example of what evolved cardiology can be and is. But at the same time, we need models to deliver this in every zip code of the country. And one of the reasons why it hasn't grown is because only big groups of cardiologists can actually deliver it. So just before we get into this, we're at the restaurant of a famous vegan, Dr. Joel Kahn, who's going to be speaking. We have a couple of paleo people coming in later, and what I didn't want is an hour and a half back and forth about what's the best diet, because if you want that, you can see it very other places. And I was listening to Dr. David Katz, who spoke at the IHS last week, and he had this cool diagram that I wanted to show you and make sure that everyone sees at home. So, he said that basically if you take all the popular diets and you sort of plot them next to each other, what you end up seeing is that there's one olive in the middle, which is common to all of them, which is healthy. And, before we get into, we're going to talk a lot about nutrition tonight. We're going to talk about preventive cardiology. But he summed it up with the Michael Pollan quote, which is eat real food, mainly plants and not too much. That is a great starting point. That's what's served in the Green Space Cafe. And so to head off any controversy before it starts, I thought we'd just get into that now. All right, so It's time for our first speaker. If you're watching at home, you can send me a tweet with hashtag Functional Forum. You can ask questions for the speakers later. It's my great pleasure to welcome as our keynote speaker, the owner of the Green Space Cafe, an innovator and an agitator, to say the least, on the cutting edge of medicine. Please, everyone, welcome Dr. Joel Kahn.
Well, thank you very much. I'm both proud to be here in my own family restaurant, but more excited to speak to you and the audience and the entire world. To give a talk in a format that Dr. Dean Ornish spoke at recently gives me extreme pleasure. And I want to shout out to Regina Drews. Hi, Regina, in New York. You're doing amazing work, a integrative cardiologist with an academic hospital position and really an amazing vision for holistic cardiology. So, to quote the great Charles Dickens, it is really in cardiology, the 30 years I've spent, both the best of times and the worst of times, because there's barely a field anywhere that has more technology, that has the ability to treat people towards the end of a disease process and bring them back to function and good life. But the worst of times we've seen in the last few months, how can Bob Harper have a heart attack at age 51? How was that not detected? How did our system fail? How did Carrie Fisher, how did Bill Paxton end up having bypass surgery and not know that 10 years earlier? So he didn't need bypass surgery. We have a problem. And 50 years ago, Dr. Dennis Burkitt, famous for Burkitt's lymphoma, talked of an analogy where the sink is running and the sink is running and the sink is overflowing, and everybody's mopping up to control it. Nobody thinks about turning off the sink. Dr. Dean Ornish has used that example in his lectures, and I'll use it in mine. Functional medicine, the evolution of cardiology, has got to go to looking at why is the sink overflowing and turning off the root causes and the root sources. So we have become a specialty of cardiology that has distanced ourselves from patients, has distanced ourselves from simple solutions and root causes. And what James talked about, 80 to 90% proven scientific ability to prevent that heart attack, to prevent that stroke, is something we've just not capitalized on, and something that I've dedicated a lot of energy, and I'll speak about that. So we have this great heritage in medicine and cardiology going back 1,000 years to the famous physician and caliphate advisor Maimonides. No disease that can be treated by diet should be treated with any other means. The founder of the Mayo Clinic. The aim of medicine is to prevent disease and prolong life. The ideal of medicine is to eliminate the need of a physician. And I ask you to predict, how old is this quote? A heart attack after age 80 is an act of God or God's will, but a heart attack before age 80 is a medical failure. Now that might sound like a very current quote, and heart attack before age 80, a Bob Harper, a Carrie Fisher, a Bill Paxton, a James Gandolfino is a medical failure, which I believe very strongly. It's a complete breakdown of the technology we have. That was said by Paul Dudley White, who was chief of cardiology at Harvard, who was President Eisenhower's physician, was said in 1955. And the picture in the middle is Dr. Dudley White in a tie in Italy with the famous Dr. Ansel Keys, because they knew early on your food choice, your fitness choice, your love choice, and your sleep choice made tremendous differences in your health. But somewhere we lost our way, and we became, in my field, very high-tech, and high-tech started to replace high-touch. So two pioneers to your left in the white jacket is Dr. Mason Sones, who accidentally discovered you can put a catheter in a heart artery, you can inject dye, and the patient doesn't die themselves. So we started a field of technology in coronary angiography. Very important, but the patient was draped. And I remember in 10 to 15,000 catheterizations I did, my patient was that big. That was the little hole in the drape that I dealt with. Next to him is Dr. Rene Favolaro, giving him a hug, the first physician at the Cleveland Clinic and around the world to do a bypass operation. They're wonderful physicians, and to the right is Dr. Andreas Grunzig from Zurich, moved to Emory University, the first angioplasty, first in legs, then in human hearts, found out people didn't die when you put a balloon in their heart arteries. Incredible breakthroughs in technology, but the beginning of separating the physician and the patient, the healthcare provider and the patient, that has removed the focus on the human nature of medicine to some degree. And few have said it better than the famous Dr. Mehmet Oz. What we have now is doctors who are actually better technically than what they're doing than their specialty in 30 to 40 years. But we lost the relationship when doctors would look people in the eye, because now we look at laptops, and say, I care about you. We can do this together. We can beat this problem. And the question is, how can we use multiple modalities and community and all that we're going to talk about today to bring back that eye-to-eye contact with a patient? Let them know we care about them, let them know we love them. So how do we regain that when this quote, I spent years studying nutrition in med school, said no doctor ever, and that can be said about mind, body, and that can be said about sleep, and that can be said about stress management, because as a group, we aren't always the healthiest, we aren't always the low stress, and we certainly aren't always the best fed. I just came back from a conference in Washington from the American College of Cardiology dedicated to studying cancer-heart interactions, and the food served were known carcinogens according to the World Health Organization. There's a disconnect, and I can only look to a brighter future, but the current status is a lost path for regaining that tradition. So I've had an interesting career I never would have predicted. The picture on the right is that this is my 40-year journey through the Sinai Desert, a little like Moses. I walked into the cafeteria on my first day of undergrad, University of Michigan, 1977, with that nice woman over there as my girlfriend, and we both decided that day we're giving up meat. It wasn't Lent, it was disgusting, and we became vegetarians 40 years ago out of just an impulse. Now, the man that's hugging me, and I'm hugging him in the green tie, was somebody I met 6 months ago who was the food director in that dorm on that day, and when I lectured to the Dietitians Association, he came up and said, I'm the reason you've been vegetarian and vegan for 40 years. You really owe me a thank you, so thanks to him. But along my career as a cardiologist, I had the great honor to train with a gentleman with the mustache in the middle, Dr. Jeffrey Hartzer in Kansas City, Missouri. At that time, the single most exciting, high-tech, and most advanced center in the world to train to learn how to put balloons in arteries and relieve cardiac obstruction. I can't recall in the city of Masterpiece KC barbecue sauce ever hearing about nutrition. But man, we became great technicians. But fortunately for me, I was carrying this undergraduate tradition of spending some time on my nutrition. And then fortunately, I was influenced very early in my career by the gentleman on the right, Dr. Dean Ornish, in a fairly recent picture, and I want to tell you about that story because it transformed my practice, and it really was serendipity. It wasn't thought out. So in case you aren't aware of Dr. Dean Ornish, he developed a program, which is the graphic on the right, that combined an early introduction he had to Eastern medicine in his house in Dallas, Texas, where his father was a prominent orthodontist. And he understood the influence of mind and body early in his career. But he developed what he called the lifestyle heart trial, where he took a plant-based diet without added oil, controversial maybe, less than 10% of calories from fat total. He did exercise, which in these cardiac patients was largely just walking. He anticipated long before that you didn't need a marathon to be healthy. You needed standing and motion and walking. He combined it with stress management using yoga, meditation, and such. And really what he would tell you is the key is number 4, support, getting together on a regular basis, like a group I'll talk about in a little bit, the Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group, finding your peers, walking the distance with other people who are walking the same path. And they met and they became friends and they loved and supported. And Dr. Ornish would tell you that's the most important program of his healing program. He did randomized trials that, if you look at the date, this paper was published 3 weeks after I started my first job in cardiology as this cath lab animal who happened to like salad more than steak. But then I learned 3 weeks into my career I could heal with a salad as much as I could heal with a stent. And I pursued both paths because they both were part of the toolbox. Dr. Ornish followed up his study. If you look at the graph on the right, 1998, a paper that should have transformed medicine worldwide and been in every cafeteria and every patient chart and every patient discharge program. But these are patients that were randomized to either yoga, stress, love, support, exercise, and a plant-based diet, or they got standard cardiology care, and they agreed to have a baseline heart catheterization and another one 5 years later. The curve that goes up is what happens to your heart arteries if you see and are treated in a standard cardiology clinic. Year after year after year, your blockages get worse. The lower curve is what happens if you follow a program that's comprehensive, lifestyle-oriented, and supported by community. You actually can reverse atherosclerosis. This is the most high-tech technology available then and to this date, and there's no question about it. This terrible, terrible illness that causes so much pain, suffering, and loss can be reversed. It's never been questioned since. It's acknowledged. Well, why is the basis of it plant-based diets? Why is that diagram that James showed have that beautiful whole food fiber-rich olive at the middle, an olive, not olive oil, in the middle? And that's because we know that there's just nutrients in plants found nowhere else. There's the fiber, there's the phytonutrients, antioxidants, carotenoids, we can go on, magnesium. We can make it very academic, but the point is we were born to eat lots of plants. We can talk about how many in a minute. This is a study done 3 years ago that looked, can you dose fruits and vegetables like a medication? And what impact does it have on your risk of heart disease, your risk of cancer, and your overall chance of surviving during a study period? And as you can see, from 0 to 1 servings of fruits and vegetables a day and a fairly high risk of all these problems, you can drop 30 to 40% your risk of developing the chronic diseases in America by simply eating a lot of fruits and vegetables. This plateaued around 4 to 6 servings a day, which in the United States is far beyond the average of 1.5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. In fact, less than 1% of children are reaching nutritional and lifestyle targets in this country right now, with the current target to move that to 1%. So nutrition is powerful. Plants are healing. Plants are information. Plants are medication. And I apologize, this is a bit wordy, but just 2 weeks ago, in the International Journal of Epidemiology, an even larger study, just hang with me here, a meta-analysis of the 95 best studies involving 2 million people who were analyzed for their dietary choices and were followed up. Those that ate 800 grams of fruits and vegetables a day, that is 1 pound and 3/4. That is the biggest bowl you have in your house, getting filled with kale and romaine and strawberries and blueberries and whatever else you want to put in your personal blender. But 1 3/4 pounds of fruits and vegetables a day will reduce your risk of cancer, heart disease, stroke, and all-cause mortality. Every malady that makes our patients weak, makes our patients frail, and robs our patients of age can be reversed in part by this very, very rich fruit and vegetable diet. Now, that's a challenge, and we all have to ask ourselves, what can we do with our patients to give them a strategy at their home, at their workplace, and maybe when they socialize in restaurants like this, that they can achieve that goal, because it is a daunting goal. But still, even 4 to 5 to 6 servings a day are really powerful and effective. There is simply no possible way to talk any commonality in nutritional philosophies without putting, as we just saw with that beautiful graphic from Dr. David Katz, the centrality that everybody agrees on and nobody should ever disagree. So in my life, I made a shift, and it's been a 27-year process since training of being a cath lab animal in a 3 a.m. heart attack, to asking the question, why is this person having a heart attack? And was there something I could have done earlier and something for other patients I can do earlier? So I transitioned. The picture on the right is my last year in Kansas City with Dr. Barry Rutherford in the middle. That's me in the white jacket with a mustache, painfully much younger than now. And Dr. Jeff Hartzer, blessed memory, holding the styrofoam coffee cup, which if I had known better, I would have asked him to put that in glass, but that was a long time ago. To now where we're standing, Green Space Cafe, and our commitment, my commitment, my family's commitment to, in every path we can take, add to the community's awareness of this power of healing and this power of integration and this power of community support. So I've taken a very active role. Hopefully some of you have seen a few of the pieces, as a blogger everywhere, as a podcast guest everywhere, as a speaker during Heart Month. I don't charge during Heart Month. You want me to come to your flower shop or your law firm, it's Heart Month. We need the message out that heart disease is reversible, that we're all at risk. I don't care if you're thin. I don't care if you're exercise, because that's Bob Harper. I don't care, if you have family history or not. We need to define, and extending it to TV and other modalities. So I developed a clinic about 1.5 years ago as a place where I could do advanced work to define for people that are willing to come to see me the nature of their disease and plans for reversal. It's a little hard to see, but on the upper left are labs that were done with a patient who was willing to adopt a totally bacon-driven diet, and become plant-based for 30 days. And they had the opportunity to do very advanced labs before and after, and amazing drops in inflammation, amazing drops in cholesterol, amazing drops in a new marker called TMAO that's derived out of animal products in the microbiome, and the power of just 30 days on changing our physiology, whether it's totally, partially, but always fruit and vegetable-rich diets. Tracking atherosclerosis by advanced carotid ultrasounds, and demonstrating that this terrible, terrible disease, if identified early, even identified late in the process, is a reversible beast. The percentage of stenosis will go down. And very grateful Crane's business recognized my clinic as a special healing place, and I'm proud of that moment. So we overlook these root causes. I won't name anybody in particular, but do we know how they sleep? Do we know the quality? We know we'll speak in a few minutes on our panel about the importance of obstructive sleep apnea. Stress, the big, big elephant in most medical practices that rarely gets addressed. The mind-body, using love, using technology like HeartMath, like Headspace, like any other, the Kirtan Kriya, looking at the mouth of a source of inflammation and a source of root causes of disease that's often overlooked. Looking for early calcification of vessels. I can't tell you, I have a clinic dedicated to what's called cardio-oncology, cancer patients. And I review their CAT scans, the reports, and they mention that the heart arteries are calcified, and they mention that the aorta is calcified, and it's never been recognized as silent but important atherosclerosis. We need to be aware that aging of arteries, as Thomas Sydenham said in the 1600s, a man is as old as his arteries, which obviously applies to women, is an easy thing to review when you're looking at medical data. It's free data. The total ignorance of a very atherosclerotic particle called lipoprotein A, which in 20 to 30% of Americans is elevated, is occluding their arteries, and is drawn in less than 5% of people at $28 as a blood test, available in every lab. And lastly, looking for new markers, new root causes, new pathologies. The microbiome, this giant, giant living organism in our body that we barely understand, but knowing now that it's related to atherosclerosis, congestive heart failure, diabetic outcome, and kidney disease itself, and knowing that there are some nutritional-based interventions that may improve if you're willing to measure and follow up on it. Using early diagnosis. This is a platform that I speak on to the public all the time. Not waiting to find out that you have coronary artery disease in an emergency room, in a cath lab, or worse, in an autopsy suite. Finding out early, at age 40 and beyond. Recent studies in the last 2 weeks show from age 35 to 45, a calcium scan for $75 in this community can predict the prognosis of that young person for the next 15 years better than any other modality. Yes, there's a small amount of radiation, but it has dropped significantly on par with a mammogram and should not be overlooked. In my last minute or so, I want to talk about the community, the importance of developing community programming, not dependent on doctors' offices, not dependent on hospitals. About 3 years ago, a very wonderful gentleman in the audience, Paul Chadlin, called me and said, I have reversed my heart disease with a very sophisticated, advanced nutritional protocol at the Cleveland Clinic, but I want some support, I want some peers, I want to meet some people doing the same thing. Can we make a group, which we both thought would involve maybe 25 people in this area of Detroit, and the first meeting had 130, second meeting over 150, and now has 3,400 members, the largest nutrition support group in the world, with no funding, with grassroots, with a lot of sweat, and an amazing volunteer group, some of whom are here tonight. But this is monthly meetings to bring in world-class speakers, teaching them the importance of nutrition in their life, but also giving them friends and peers and hugs. It involves small groups, patterned on Saddleback Church, patterned on most groups that recognize community support is the magic, is the special sauce. And it involves teaching and training on how to have life skills. There's the willpower and the skill power. And the plant-based nutrition support group, check it out at pbnsg.org. Institute it in your own community. Get a doctor and a patient that have some passion, and you can change the world. So I suggest that we don't throw away high tech. It's helping lives all the time. But we don't lose high touch. And we focus on high fiber, as I call it, because Dr. Dennis Burkett identified long ago, all health revolves around how much fiber you eat. One of the first duties of a physician is to educate the masses not to take medicine, to treat yourself with lifestyle and love, and we'll all benefit from it. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Joel.
Thank you,
Great
James.
stuff.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we are off and running. Those people who know me probably know that my most exciting part, and the reason actually why we ended up doing this session here, was because of the support group. That is truly incredible, and I'm just so excited to hear about it and hear the progress of it. And our goal with these functional forum meetup groups is to develop these communities. You've heard me use this phrase before all the way through, that community is the guru of the future. And this has been high on my mind recently. In 2015, we did a functional forum. It was August 2015. It was from the Institute for Functional Medicine's annual conference on genomics. And I was convinced that community had a really strong role to play in solving these problems in medicine, but I really didn't know how big an issue it was. And then I heard UCLA Stress Lab researcher Dr. George Slavich, and he said this.
It's a very interesting meta-analytic review of a bunch of different studies published in PLOS Medicine in 2010. They just looked at the odds ratio of all-cause chronic disease-related mortality as a function of these traditional risk factors and, in addition, high levels of social stress. Social stress compared to these traditional risk factors was a stronger predictor of chronic disease-related mortality than physical inactivity, excessive alcohol use, smoking, and a bunch of other things that I'm not showing here. Now, social environmental patterning of mortality risk is not totally new. That's not a new concept. 20 years ago, House and colleagues published a really interesting and landmark paper in Science showing that across multiple countries and cultures, mortality risk decreases as social integration increases. And this is cross-cultural, this is internationally. As best we can tell, social integration is really important for health. Social isolation and other types of social stress are really bad for health, especially for health that involves immune system activity.
So here's a researcher at the UCLA Stress Lab actually showing not only the facts that you saw there, but the mechanism. And it really got me thinking, it got me excited, because this is something, I think to a certain degree, we're all a little bit bored of talking about food, even though it's super important. And I think that this is an area where there's a lot of excitement. And over the last week, I've had an opportunity to do my first CME, Certified Medical Education talk for doctors, which is quite amusing / interesting when you realize that I have no medical credentials at all, right? So to give a medical talk where people can actually get credit for attending seems a little bit unlikely. But if there's one thing that we have done at the Functional Forum, it's created community. And both of the talks that I've given at the Integrated Health Symposium and at UCSF on Saturday, I can see that there's a twinkle in the eye of providers who are excited about this because they know it and they've seen it. And so I've got a big announcement today, is that 2 weeks tonight, we are going to do a special webinar for our Functional Forum community called Social Isolation, How Integrative Clinics Are Solving America's Biggest Root Cause of Disease. And just to give you a little bit of a taster, are the biggest players in medicine, is a hospital capable of solving this problem? Probably not. Is pharma capable of solving this problem? Probably not. But what is really exciting is the most innovative, integrative clinics out there are building structures in their practices that can help to solve this problem, introducing people who want to be healthy to each other. That's the reason why I'm here tonight, because when I heard about the 3,500 people in the support group, I was like, this is the future of medicine. It's free, it's scalable. If we're talking about value-based care, nothing is more valuable than something that costs nothing, because value is outcomes divided by cost. And if you have 0 at the bottom, it's a pretty big number on the top. So check this out. Make sure to register. Go evomed.com/isolation. This is something that every health professional will want to watch. If you register for it, make sure to share it with your fellow professionals. It's going to be a game changer. All right, so speaking of game changers, our next speaker, he is the hero of my book, The Evolution of Medicine. Thank you all for the nice comments about my tie, and thanks to Anne from The Evolution of Medicine for making my tie. But this is a conversation. Last September, we had Dr. Jeff Glad on the Functional Forum in Chicago, and he did his spiel on really getting doctors past the fear of innovating into integrative medicine. And he shared with me a case study of some of his patients and how he was able to offer a different kind of quality of cardiology at a completely different cost base, and it spoke to something that I think is really important. Who is going to provide the evolution of cardiology? I'm convinced it's the integrative and functional medicine community. So to give us his thoughts, it's Return of the Mac, Dr. Jeffrey Glad.
Thank you. It's good to be here again. This is number 3. So do I have Kelly Brogan yet, or has she still got me? I got a ways to go. You have to come back to the Midwest a couple more times. All right, so I want to talk about being worth it as providers. Right? So we're all doing what we're doing. We're all seeing patients. We're all learning more because we believe what we provide to patients is worth it for them. It's worth it to us. It's worth it for our careers, for our families, for our own personal health. And most of the patients that see us believe that our care is worth it as well, from a prevention standpoint, from a less medication standpoint, from a I want to connect with a provider for the first time and spend time with them. So most of the people that come to see us value this and feel like it's worth it. But one of the criticisms of a direct pay practice is that it's for the wealthy and that it's really expensive. And so when I talk to patients in the community or potential patients in my community or my staff is talking to them on the phone, it's a value discussion. It's a talk about return on investment. And so it used to be a big talk about this long-term prevention, or over the course of several years, we can save money because it's X amount to see the doctor and to do the workup, and think about how much money you're going to save down the road. But the discussion can be, how much can I save you this afternoon? And so becoming a healthcare financial advisor, and that's how I bill myself in my office visit, saves patients hundreds to thousands of dollars day after day after day, because I've spent time to figure out how much things cost. So I want you to start to understand this and utilize this in your practice. It's an easy tool. It's not a fellowship. It's not a conference. It just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of understanding. So here's how to be worth it on the short term. Here are the truths. Doctors don't like to talk about money. We don't like those conversations. They're uncomfortable. The healthcare complex is completely cost blind. Nobody can tell a patient how much something costs. Nobody wants to talk about that, and nobody knows. But patients have growing sticker shock. And that will continue to get bigger and bigger. And so they're feeling the financial burden of healthcare. Conventional, functional, integrative, they're feeling that burden. This is a recent survey the Kaiser Family Foundation published, includes data from 2016. Premium costs are slowing. Great news, because high deductible plans are rising. So the out-of-pocket money is going up. Deductibles in 5 years have risen 49%. And for the first time in almost 30 years that they've done this survey, 51% of people with insurance have a deductible greater than $1,000. That will continue to go up because we want to keep premium growth down, but that's going to come at paying cash for services, at least for the first 1,000, but more likely the first 5 to 10,000. What an incredible opportunity to reach patients and to save them money at the point of care. We're seeing premiums rising at historically slow rates, which helps workers and employers alike, but it's made possible in part by a more rapid rise in deductibles that workers must pay. One chart shows just how devastating healthcare costs are for American families. And this was a survey this was a study that shows what happens after a major medical payment to families. And for the sake of time, you can see that everything goes down. Income goes down. Non-medical expenses go down. Liquid assets go down. What doesn't go down is revolving credit card balance for these families. 1 year later, that still rises. This is our opportunity. Prevent this significant medical event, but cost save on the small, common medical stuff. So here are the truths that we started with. We can control 2 of these, right? And it should have shifted to the top 2 because we can control the not talking about money and we can control the cost blindness. What we can't stop are patients feeling the financial burden. But now the new truths are, this is a huge opportunity for us as providers who want to see patients, who want patients to come into our office and see not just the long-term worth, but the short-term worth. So go learn how much things cost. Go find out the opportunities that you can save patients money. And so I've done this, and I continue to do this and find cost savings. So the MRI at the hospital is $2,000 to $3,000. But there's a private MRI place in Fort Wayne, Indiana, our town, that'll do it for $400 or $500. Cash. Seems simple. Procedures. Nobody can tell you in our town how much a colonoscopy is going to cost you or how much an EGD is going to cost you. But most of the patients who go have them done who have high deductibles, $5,000, $6,000. I haven't found any place local, but I send somebody up here in the Detroit area to a clinic up here, it's $1,500 cash. Biopsy, sedation, pathology, $1,500. You've saved them $3,500 to $4,500 right off the bat. Specialists. I took my son to an orthopedic surgeon who was out of network. We called the office before the appointment, do you have a cash rate? We sure do. If you pay $250 down, everything is 30% discounted. If the charge is less than $250, we give you back the difference. Got to have these conversations for yourself, but also for your patients. Labs is the big one that we're going to talk about here in a minute, specific to cardiology. Serve as that financial advisor. Learn how much things cost in your community and help patients save big money. Here is, I show this to patients day after day after day. These are hospital charges for a standard lab panel that we order. And I've put arrows on the ones that are specific to a cardiology workup. So a fasting lipid profile, an ultrasensitive C-reactive protein, a homocysteine level. I think I threw a CBC in there. So this is a conventional workup. This is going to end up being $1,400, $1,481. That's the hospital rate for those labs. Yeah, some insurances are going to discount that. Hers didn't, hers did some, but her out-of-pocket was still very significant. How about the consult to tell you everything looks good? Or the phone call from the MA that says it's all fine? How does that help anybody? That costs $400 to $800 for that consult because it's a specialist appointment. So your total visit cost in the conventional realm for that patient is $1,800. Now, if they come to my office and we have negotiated cash labs, that total cost of blood work that was $1,481, the exact data is $76.10. We charge a $50 administrative fee because my staff has to process that order. This patient's total lab cost is now $126.10. That's a savings, I took out the consult part, just in labs of $1,288.71. If you apply that money to the cost of my consults, that's over 4 hours spent with me. You don't need or want 4 hours spent with me, right? So we'll review this for an hour, and you get to go home with almost $1,000 in your pocket. So become a healthcare consumer. Seek out opportunities to offer things to patients that will save them money at the point of care. Be worth it in the short term as well as the long term. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Really appreciate, I really felt like we need to have this conversation because, there's been some wacky stuff going on with labs and supplements and everything in the space. And I would say the biggest theme that we see worldwide, countrywide, medicine-wide, functional medicine-wide is the truth will out, right? It's becoming less and less clear whether you're talking about what Trump and Hillary are up to or otherwise. Like, stuff is getting out that didn't used to get out. And I think there's been a lot of veil around medicine. And I think that if we can be the ones that are bringing truth directly to the patient, that's how you build trust. And Jeff's done an amazing job of that in building it in Fort Wayne. And part of the reason why, we had Jeff as as one of the heroes of my book is because I wanted to make doctors, when they read that book, think, I could do that. And that's what Jeff's doing, and so I really appreciate coming up to Detroit to share that. And hopefully all of you guys can see here, there's no better way to gain someone's trust than to really show them how you can help them, save them money, and huge swathes of the population are finding themselves for the first time in a high deductible health plan. What used to be high quality is now high deductible, and so they're paying. And they're just typically going as they would through the system and then just being shocked when the bill arrives. And so we can get out there ahead of it and be proactive. So we've got a new segment on the show. It's called Notes from the Practice Accelerator. This is a program that we started really to help practitioners to actualize and create more efficient functional medicine practices. A couple of pieces of news from the week. So I don't know if anyone saw this, but Amazon is now in the supplements business. And this, in the same way as Jeff talked about with the labs today, I think what you're starting to see is that it's going to become really clear that the pricing, there's going to be really transparent pricing on supplements, and I think it's going to be harder and harder to be able to base your value as a provider on the supplements that you sell. And I think that one of the things that we've looked at through our membership course, through the accelerators, you need to have a business model that values you the person, your education, your time, and not other stuff that you just happen to sell. That was just part of, Functional Medicine 1.0. Bob Roundtree spoke at the Integrated Health Symposium, and he was talking about non-acute fatty liver disease, and he was saying in the first iteration of his practice in 1982, when he realized that people needed milk thistle, he literally had a jar of it, a jar of the actual herb, and he would have people chew it because, a tablet or a tincture was still years away. No one was making it. This was 1980. And so you can see that medicine's evolved. It made sense for everyone to keep supplements in their practice and to mark it up. And some people, maybe it even made sense to not make money on the visit so you can make money on the supplements or whatever. 3 years ago in the Functional Forum, I said, look, there's going to be a time when it's not going to be cool to make money on supplements. And I think that this shows that I think we all thought functional medicine is going to grow and it's all going to be happy and dandy. This is the beginning of the innovation in the space. This is the beginning of the disruption in the space, and big players are going to be looking at predictive, preventive medicine and saying, I want a piece of that. And so it's going to lead to better outcomes for the patient, but we may have to realign our business models. And the second thing that came out today, just to say, 2/3 of Americans see doctors who are paid by drug companies. Again, this came out today. The Drexel University study. We should be on this. We should be educating in every zip code of America that 2/3 of doctors are on the payroll. I'm not. Come and see me, right? It's maybe as simple as that. Okay, so other big news about the accelerator. So back in September, we had Dr. Terry Walls come and speak. She was doing her functional medicine MS reversal program in the VA, and she said, by doing the care as a group, you have that cross-pollination, the insights, the aha moments. Now that I've done it as a group, I'll never do it individually again. This is pointing towards a new way of practicing participatory medicine in groups. Part of the reason why we had the talk about community. So I got some exciting news is that Terry has now left the VA and is coming into our accelerator and going to work with our accelerator community to be able to create a group structure for MS, but for all of these other chronic diseases, because we're seeing that doctors and practices that are creating groups are able to make it available for everyone, make it cheaper, and to also do it. So it's a cool thing that we have going on there. We're also helping doctors to actualize and operationalize some of the technologies. So if you're thinking about what are you actually going to get patients to pay for, paying for things that help them feel like they're getting a ridiculously high standard of care is something, and Nudge Coach is one of those tools where you can actually see what people are eating between their appointments, see whether they're exercising, see what they're doing. The food journal is dead, and Nudge is here to stay. So one of the things that we've been talking about in our Practice Accelerators, is there a predictable way for any practice to start and to build a successful practice and to bring in patients consistently, where you can literally turn up the tap and turn it down? And what we're starting to see is some best practices in the industry is that once you have your practice niche and you know the kind of patients you want, maybe it's cardiology patients, there is something going on the corner of Facebook ads and Eventbrite where we can literally put on a series of events in a community. There are people looking on Eventbrite for events anyway, but then pushing Facebook ads that are targeted to, let's say, women between the ages of 40 and 70 who live within 10 miles of your practice, who happen to like Mark Hyman, Josh Axe, Mind Body Green, and if you're doing an autoimmune one, the Lupus Association of America and the, I don't know, colitis, patients like me, things that they've already self-identified themselves on Facebook as liking certain things. We can get them into our practice. Eventbrite gets them to the event. It also captures their email and phone number. You can set up reminders. You can do an event to get them into your practice and follow up. These are the kind of things that we're talking about in the Practice Accelerator. And what we're really trying to do is to create for any physician a step-by-step guide to build a functional practice, delivering the kind of care that Jeff's talking about, and delivering this evolved level. So if you're interested in the accelerator, go and check out goevomed.com/accelerator. We used to have sponsors on the show. Now we're the sponsor, and it's the Evolution of Medicine Practice Accelerator. So we have our third speaker here this evening. We have been our first sponsor actually on the Functional Forum. Once we realized from Jeff that a mission that we could actualize was 100,000 integrative and functional micro practices, we looked out into the world and we thought, okay, who can help us actualize that vision? Charlie Webb from Freedom Practice Coaching has built, first of all, a very successful practice and now is training other doctors. And one of the things that he's done and why I brought him in here today is if you're going to bring patients into your practice, how do you then, what kind of offer should you give them that's going to help them get healthy and provide the right structure? And, one of the things you see with Dean Ornish's program, for instance, that pays, if you're a doctor and you're delivering Dean Ornish's program, you get paid $7,200. And really the doctor, and that's by Medicare, and it's more for the others. So here's a package of care over 9 weeks that combines visits from the doctor, visits from the nurse, the case manager, the nutrition, the stress management, the community, all of that is put into a nice package in $7,200. What we need right now is that kind of package created for all kinds of diseases, not just cardiology, but all of the specialties, because that episodes of care and value-based care is the way that the program is going, is the way that medicine is going. And so I'm really excited to bring Charlie in here to talk about the nuts and bolts of creating a package that can help patients get to a level of health. So please, a warm Detroit welcome for Dr. Charlie Webb.
So thank you, James, for the invite, and Joel, thank you for opening up your establishment. I appreciate it. It's great, and I admit I'm a meat eater, but I eat a lot of vegetables, and I don't count my wine as part of my fruit. So what I'd like to talk about, James asked me to come speak about, how do we package our services, and so as I get to that, I've got a lot to cover because I think it's going to be important for us to understand. There's a process that has to take place before you ever offer a prospective patient a package that's going to allow them to gain their goals. I was looking at some recent research done by Accenture, a global consulting group, and in 2000, there were, out of the calculation that did an estimate of 683,000 practitioners in the US, 57% were independent. Where do you think that is today? There's now 821,000, and it went from 57% independent down to 33%. So today, 2/3 of all practitioners have given up the right to make the decisions with their business, with their practice, with their patients, and they're allowing insurance companies and bureaucrats to make those decisions. So there's an exodus for very specific reasons. There's plenty of doctors like yourself and those watching this program right now on EvoMed that want to practice, that want to run a private practice, and they want to run things in a fashion that allows them to deal with those people that come to them and trust them. They want to deal with them the way that they know that they should as a practitioner, as a mentor, as a teacher, as a good diagnostician, and not have to deal with what insurance companies say that we can do or what we can't do, et cetera, which also means that we have to look at things to offer those clients, those patients, that aren't necessarily covered by insurance, as Jeff was talking about earlier. The most valuable thing that you can offer these people is your knowledge. Well, learning to do this, the reason that people drop out and they come to the point of going, I can't stay in private practice anymore, it's not feasible, I can't keep my doors open, they end up selling to a corporate situation, and now they're in a hospital or one of these many emergency clinics going up all over America. And so they've given it up, not necessarily because they want to, but because they don't understand that their practice is a business, and they don't know how to run the business. So before we get to packaging, I want to cover a few things on this. I can't cover these tonight, but some of the things that take place once you decide, I want to stay in private practice, I want to run the practice of my dreams and deliver the kind of care that I know that I should and what I can, you're going to have to learn to promote yourself. And promoting yourself, when you're in an insurance practice, you find that you get people coming to you because you're on their insurance. If you're a specialist, if you're in cardiology, you get other practitioners referring to you, et cetera. When you go at it to where you're doing more of a proactive approach, you step away from that. That doesn't mean you can't have a hybrid practice. That doesn't mean you can't still have insurance, but you're going to be working with people delivering services that aren't necessarily covered. So your public needs to know who you are. There's plenty of people that need you, but we don't know how to get out and promote ourselves, whether that is, James has got a book here, that's a promotion piece, having lessons on YouTube, having webinars, speaking publicly, et cetera, having these meetup groups like he talked about. These are all things to promote. Number two, patients who sign up, pre-education. Too often, we expect people to come in and we get confused. Someone comes in our practice, we know they need that help, and then they don't sign up for our cash services, and we're wondering what's happened. There's not a pre-education process taking place, meaning when I did have my practice, no one came into my practice for a consultation that hadn't gone through some type of pre-education. Again, whether that was online, video, webinar, live talk, what have you. And then there's the point of when they do come in, that consultation, I'm going to call that positioning, because how you communicate to that prospective person in front of you, that prospective patient, means all the difference in the world whether they're going to move forward or not. And it starts with listening to find out really where they're going. I'll talk about that a little later. But positioning is going to be important, because if this doesn't take place, again, talking to that person in front of you about what it's going to take to move forward, what those services are, and what the investment is not going to go anywhere. So I can't cover these today. James had asked me, hey, can you cover this, Charlie? Can you cover this packaging so these doctors really understand that this is the way to go? So we're going to focus on this, but let's talk a little bit about why we need to put this in and the difference between the typical practice management model and the doctor entrepreneurial model. So a lot of you've probably had some kind of maybe management coaching, and I'll express it this way. No matter what kind of practice you run, you need to find someone that knows more about the direction you want to go than you, meaning some type of coach, practice management, if you will. But I'm going to try to explain the difference here in practice entrepreneurial model or in the management model. It's really teaching you to stay in the traditional model and make it more efficient. So from the patient experience, here's what you get. Very little time with the doctor. Impersonal. Care is limited by insurance. So again, everyone that's watching right now has the mindset of, I want to offer proactive. I want to empower those to come to me. That's not always going to be covered by insurance. Patient wants you to solve their problems. The typical mindset of most Americans today is, you're the doctor, I'm the patient, you fix me, and I'm entitled to it because I have insurance. Public has been taught today, and it's going to be your job to disrupt that and teach them, well, there's another way to go. Often don't get the results they're looking for, the way that on the patient experience on the doctor entrepreneur model, you get as much time as needed. That doesn't mean you're going to have an hour appointment every time, but it means more than 7 minutes. It means more than 10 minutes. It means what you need with that individual as they go through your program. Personalized care, so it's going to be unique to them. And when we go into packaging, you'll think, well, how can you make a package unique? We'll get to that. Care is not limited by insurance. You're going to deliver exactly what they need. You're not going to make a judgment call, well, whether this person can afford it or not. That's going to come later. What you're going to do is you're going to act as the teacher, the diagnostician, the mentor, and you're going to do what's right for them and express to them and communicate to them, if this is where we're going, this is what you need. Patient takes responsibility for their health, so there's basically a partnership. Get great results and often send referrals. I think my mic, just lost my mic. We got it? You good? Okay. All right. Doctor experience. For this, practice management model, doctor experience. Seeing many patients a week, too many patients, I had that model one time. Little time to spend with your patients, unpredictable insurance payments, focus on the quantity of patients rather than quality, work 5-6 days a week. And practice is dependent on you, so you go on vacation, your practice doesn't make anything. So doctors don't take vacations. Doctor entrepreneurial model, see as many patients as you want or need. You decide how big you want the practice. You decide, do I want to work 3 days a week? Do I want to work 4 days a week? As much time as needed for the patients. So in your system and your education and how you put that together, you're going to be able to spend, because what you're going to find, you're going to be delivering your services and your care, and the most powerful thing that you can deliver is you're going to be your knowledge. So we don't have to worry about making money on tests. We don't have to worry about making money on supplements. The biggest investment they're going to make is with what you can do to take them to the next place, take them to their destiny. You control your own financial destiny, focus on the quality of your service and care, much higher experience for the patient. Work 4 days a week, practice can run independent from you. That won't happen right off the bat, but that may be a goal for you to make certain that practice is running and is able to function if you decide to take time off with your family. All right, so back to packaging. So the ethical responsibility of packaging is this: determine what their goals are. When people come into your practice, and since this is a cardiovascular, I identified as that for this particular focus. When someone comes in and they've got cardiovascular problems, etc., they're not coming in to say, hey, heal me of my heart disease. What they're asking and what they're shouting, they just don't know how to communicate it, is they're saying, doctor, I'm scared to death that something's going wrong here, because when I'm walking down the block with my dogs, my legs begin to hurt. I'm starting to get chest pain when I ride the bike with my daughter. I'm having erectile dysfunction, and I feel like I'm a little too young for that, and I'm losing my confidence. I feel like this is an important part of my relationship, and I'm about 30 pounds heavier, but I'm scared to work out because my uncle was having some of the same symptoms, had a heart attack and died. Okay? So it's not about the symptoms, it's about what's going to happen. They're in a place where they don't want to live anymore. They want to live in a different destination. And how they get there isn't so important. It needs to be logical to them, and they have to have confidence and faith in you as a practitioner. I want to get to Tahiti because I don't want to live here. I'm in Michigan right now. I want to live in Tahiti. Okay? How do I get there, doctor? They're not overly concerned with exactly how the plane flies and how comfortable the plane's going to be and what meals are going to be fed on the plane. They just need to know, I'm confident that Delta's going to get me from here to Tahiti, okay? As physicians, we have a tendency to preach about the plane trip, to preach about how great the plane trip's going to be, how great we are as the captain of the ship. What they're interested in is, I don't want to live here anymore. I want to live in Tahiti. Can you get me there? I can get you there. And when we hear that and we express that and they say, that's right, that's what I'm looking for, now they're seeing their health as an investment. The plane trip's an expense. Your services are an expense. The supplements are an expense. The goal and the destination is an investment, okay? So determine what their goals are. Listen to them. Communicate what they need to achieve their goals. So up front, once I know what those are, and I've communicated to that person and their loved one, if they have a spouse, right? I'm going to go back to them. Is this where you want? That's where we want to go. Here's what we're going to need to get there, and what your responsibilities are, and what the financial commitment. Now, the first thing that's going to happen is, if this is where I want to go, I've got to make certain it's very clear what it's going to take. There has to be agreement. I'm willing. And it's logical. It makes sense. I believe that plane's going to get me into Tahiti. I'm all on board. And then here's your responsibilities. Are you willing to do that? Here's what my responsibilities are. And now, and not until then, do we ever get to a financial commitment. You never, ever have any purpose or point going into what the finances are if they're not fully on board, ready to fly to Tahiti, okay? So the ethical responsibility, let's make certain everything's up front. The package is best for the patient because they know in advance what they're getting into. We don't drag them along visit to visit to visit. They know, is it going to be 3 months, Doc? Is it going to be 4? How long is it going to take? The personal responsibility and involvement on their side. All the product, service, education, available. They just need to know you got them. You don't have to go into a lot of detail. They just know you got them. What's their investment? Package is best for the practitioner. You have a long-term commitment up front as a partner in health. You get paid for your knowledge. You get paid up front for your services. You won't have to sell your patient every visit. And by the way, getting paid up front for your services also allows them to have a budget it out and make payments. So it makes it more affordable. You can charge more. You can actually charge what you're worth. You're not going to upsell stuff. Again, I didn't upsell labs and things like this. It was my knowledge and my team's knowledge. The patient has skin in the game, so you have compliance. And then, so when we package things, I'm going to try to move pretty quick here when we package things, and I'm going to show you a package so it makes sense to you. But if I brought someone in here, every practitioner in right now, if I brought someone off the street and you had 5 minutes to read their history and gave you what their drugs were, their medications, what surgeries they had, how old they were, et cetera, and you had 5 minutes to talk to them, there's not one person here that couldn't determine that's a mild cardiac case, that's a moderate cardiac case, or that's a severe cardiac case. You can do it in 10 minutes. So we can design packages ahead of time that compile all the fundamentals that we want to have in that, whether it's nutrition, certain supplements, certain labs, et cetera, ahead of time, and then we can tweak it for that person. But again, what we're not selling, what orthodontists have figured out pretty well, is when someone comes in and they want beautiful smile, $7,000, $8,000 is reasonable. What's not reasonable is $7,000 for the hardware, and they never sell you the hardware. You're selling someone a life. You're changing their entire life. And sometimes, as Jeff mentioned, again, we have a hard time thinking somehow that's not worth it. Okay, so this is an example of a package. I know you can't see this, so I'm going to blow it up. And this was one of my packages, and you can put this with any kind of disease process, and you can change it, et cetera. I just want to give you an idea. So, case evaluation. Now, on that case evaluation, for this particular program, $1,800. And a lot of times we think that when we sit down with them, that's when the clock starts. Yet if you go to an attorney and you want him to take your case, he's going to ask for a fee up front because he's going to do research. He or she will do research on your case. Spend a lot of time and hours. When you take on a case, you're going to be reviewing labs. You might be calling another physician. You might be doing some research. That's all part of your case evaluation that you should be charging for. If you're doing your job right, you should be spending time on what that case evaluation is, right? So then you have office visits, $1,000 in this case. Is there any specific number of visits? No, but they'll get the visits they need in that course of time. Some people are different. Some people that are more compliant, maybe less visits. It's not going to be based on it. It's going to be based on results. Supplementation, nutraceuticals. So whatever those are going to be, I don't know in this case because all I know is it might be a 4-month case. It might be a 6-month case. And we know in this case, this was going to be covering 4 months worth of supplements. The 6 months is the management. So 4 months, we know that $1,000 on the average person that came into my office, that would cover it. It may be different in your case. It may be $800, it may be $1,200. So every time they get a supplement, they don't have to go back and pay for it, right? It's already been done. And then you have diagnostic testing, whatever those tests are. I didn't upcharge for my test. You may have a lot more tests. You may have less than this. Then you have educational tools. I had a book, a binder. There was wellness classes. There was et cetera, et cetera. So you can see here that the only hard costs are supplementation and diagnostic tests. You can see that 70% of that fee down at the end, $6,000, 70% of that fee, that was the knowledge. That's what they invested into for the outcome. You see? Okay, so packaging your services just does not have to be difficult. I know we covered this very, very quickly in our timeline, but hopefully that'll start giving you some insight on how to start putting this together. And you're going to have again more than one, but you can tie them in once you get the person. But put these together ahead of time makes it a lot easier, and it's a lot better for your patients. Thanks for your time, guys.
Thanks, Charlie. All right, we're going to jump into the panel here next. If you guys want to grab the chairs and stick it on. Where's Dr. Nandi? He ran out. No worries. Look, Dr. Nandy's in the house. He's on ABC. I just had a chat with him a little bit earlier about what he was talking about in his show today. He was talking about exercise and really how, people get prescribed exercise typically a little bit too late when they've already have a heart disease or some issue, whereas actually what's needed is that to happen a lot earlier. He was talking on that ABC today. Sorry to miss him, but so glad to have you here, Callie. No worries. We're going to have a panel. We've got the three speakers. We got Team Thompson in the house. Can we have a cheer from Team Thompson? They get rowdy. Team Thompson gets rowdy. Dr. Doug Thompson, he's first here. Doc, why does a dentist relevant and the work of an integrative dentist relevant to the evolution of cardiology?
Yeah, thanks so much, James, for the question. Any dentist has a really great opportunity to integrate medicine into their practice. And one of the big things is just the recognition that a patient might be at high risk for cardiovascular disease or have some cardiovascular issues. And we can see that in our patient evaluation and health history. And if you happen to be the dentist that gets that person to somebody like Joel, who can, through advanced biomarker panel, find out that they're at a really short near-term risk for a heart attack or a stroke, it's really a valuable service. And we can do that in dentistry.
One of the things we've really encouraged is to have dentists at all of these functional forum meetup groups. It's a key part of the whole community, and one integrative dentist can sort of support a whole practitioner community who are doing it. So I appreciate you sharing that. Joel, go to some of Charlie's points here. What are some of the questions that you ask to get people to take their cardiology seriously before it's an acute issue that you're being brought in to do a stent or whatever?
Well, it always boils down to some education. I mean, the statement, #1 killer of men and women in America, and there's so many examples lately. I mean, I think they come because they're serious. It's pre-selected, and I don't do exactly the model that was presented, but I like that model a whole lot, and I may be talking to you more about it. I'm in a cash-based practice, and so it is pre-selected. It's very interesting. My cash-based practice is a range of economic strata. I have priests, and I have school teachers, and I have principals, and I have, scions of business all across. But the common denominator is they've decided their health is worth it. They've decided they're a bit frustrated with the standard practice. And they're just looking for, one is that love, connection, and eyeball that I care about you and I want to help you get better. And two is, high tech, high touch. I mean, I promote myself as having more advanced technology that we can translate into simple steps. Willpower, you're here, but we need skill power. We need to translate. What are we doing tomorrow morning? What are we doing at lunch? What are we doing when you go to bed at night and you're not sleeping? So I think they're coming, given that there's not a lot of, right now, integrative cardiologists, functional cardiologists. They're pre-selected as serious candidates for change. And it's amazing how quick they will change.
Are there people in the Detroit area who are doing the Ornish reversal program on insurance?
The closest we have, as far as a formal program, we have the Pritikin Intensive Cardiac Rehab Program in Ann Arbor, Michigan at St. Joseph Mercy Ann Arbor. I'll just share that. I visited up there. I actually practiced there for a while long ago and lectured there recently. They're killing it. They're crushing it. This program that asks people to spend serious time, do cooking classes, talk about serious lifestyle change, they can't handle the volume, and the administrators are very cautious about this. They've just committed over $1 million to the program to actually build them the space it really deserved, because it's taking an essential program. Unfortunately, it's a downstream overflowing sink program. You have to have a stent, a bypass, heart attack, a transplant, or something really serious like that to qualify. You can't be early in the game and benefit so you don't end up there. Maybe that'll come down the road, but nonetheless, they've been so successful, and it's transforming lives. And I ask people, it's worth the drive for 2-3 months to get all that Nathan Pritikin, Dean Ornish, and others have put into programs like that. But in the large suburban metropolitan population of Detroit, I know we have at least one person here in cardiac rehab. We badly need a program right here in the city.
Absolutely. Well, I hope that can be stimulated from tonight. And what do you think? Jeff, you do a lot of different community type of events in Fort Wayne, and especially maybe when you were starting your practice to get people through the door and knew who you were. What were some of the sort of community-based events that you saw that really sort of put you on the map and added value to the community connection to build your practice?
Well, I mean, I think the big one that you and I sort of synergized at the very beginning, when we were at a conference together, was we did movie nights. So we did two, and that was early on in practice. And one of the missions was, to sort of put the message out in our community about what we were about and what type of practice we had. But also, other resources in the community and education. So we did Food Inc. was the first one we did, and then Escape Fire was the second movie. And each time we rented out a local theater and used Eventbrite to sell the tickets, and then had local food places that served food of our, that had the Whole Foods mentality. They came, and so we promoted them. And so we watched the movie together in the theater. I got up and introduced myself and kind of walked through a little bit about our practice, kept it very brief. We showed the movie. They had a big lobby where the food vendors were there and just kind of had discussion and talks. And then we came back into the theater and I ran a panel. And just had a discussion. So for Food Inc., I had a local restaurateur, I had a grass-fed beef farmer, and just ran a Q&A with the crowd about the movie and how it impacted them. And then for Escape Fire, which is the perfect one if you're going to start an integrator or functional practice, I had an insurance agent talking about the best type of insurance for people who wanted to invest in themselves, which was an HSA and still is. And then I had a local hospital COO who was also talking about the pains of insurance-based care. So it all funneled to what we were about and what we were doing. And so it was a great way of, the first time nobody really knew who we were, so it was all potential patients. The second time it was, okay, current patients, bring a friend and you get to come for free. And so it just wound up being this cycle of more and more people. We continue to get asked. It's been a few years. And I guess fortunately haven't needed the business to go out and do it again, but it would be, it's a really great tool.
Since you did it, it's actually even easier because you just go on Gather, they've got the film and they do it all for you. It's a great idea. Charlie, one of the things I love about your program is that when you bring patients into the practice, you're pre-educating them, but it's also happening in a group format. What sort of, when you do your dinner talks and you're bringing people into the practice, what sort of benefit do you think it adds to the practice to be able to, sort of put patients in a room with other people who are just like them right from the start?
Yeah. Well, again, this is the way I built my practice, and it worked for me, and it's worked for 250 clients since then. You have to look at, as physicians, practitioners, we're constantly repeating ourselves. We're trying to teach 52 lessons over a course of time, covering everything from understanding their blood work to gluten to vitamin E, to you name it. And we have to learn that we've got to start presenting that in classroom format because it takes the time off the physician, so you can actually help more people. You can actually see your family and your kids, not work on the weekends. But it's also helping those practice members because in group format, they also realize they're not the only one there. There's all these other people looking for the same help. And they know that I must be in the right place. Look at all these people here trusting this, and they support each other. All the time we would get members begin to work out together. They would find a friend. If they were struggling on some of their diet, they would get suggestions. Even though we had cooking classes, we had things like this, people would offer, they would bring in, hey, I've got all these different recipes that I've done. You want to share these with your clients? So it's camaraderie. And I see that all across the board, but primarily women especially. And women are typically the first people that come to the practice, then they drag the husband in, right? So they love this group activity. And so it was just a plus all the way around for the practice and for compliance. Everyone loved it.
Awesome. Okay, so get ready with your questions. We got time. If you have a question, put your hand up, and I'll come around and I'll give you the mic. And we've got a very good-looking panel of health professionals here. Dr. Thompson, you've made a real push in your practice to integrate with the rest of not just the integrated medical community, but also the medical community generally. What are some of the biggest sort of opportunities for dentists to sort of play a more proactive role in the whole community, given the clinical need and all the different areas that you've already spoken?
I think probably the two biggest opportunities for dentists is to really hone their skills on the early recognition and management of periodontal disease. And then the other thing would be patient airway management. Starting to identify people who are having problems sleeping, who are having problems, again, not getting a restful sleep. And what that does is it drives inflammatory biomarkers up and it puts these patients more at risk. So we know through really good proactive care, either in periodontal disease management or other areas, we can save that patient thousands of dollars in future medical costs. So a lot like what we were talking about earlier in intercepting these diseases early and identifying them early. I used to not have a lot of confidence in what I did, and then when I realized, you don't know who the healthcare provider is going to be that says something to a patient that either changes their whole trajectory toward health. It could be exercise, it could be hydration, it could be nutrition, it could be a lot of things. So we've created a group of wellness-oriented dentists, and I want to give a shout out to Ed Borio and Nancy Hartrick that are in the house here from our local area. But we have a nice network of people that are looking to bring wellness concepts into dental practices.
Awesome. That's so good. And yeah, look, as I said, again, if you're a dentist watching or if you're a Functional Forum meetup host, call the dentist, get them in, because I've yet to meet an integrative dentist who's not packed to the rafters. I mean, it seems to me that in all of these fields, the demand is outstripping the supply really, really quickly. There's Mark Hyman needs a doctor. I see like the list of jobs available for functional doctors now. I get those emails. I think we're going to hit a tipping point where, doctors are like, I see that there's a lot of choices here. It's not just the entrepreneurial opportunity, but there's actually jobs here that's never been here before, and it's pretty exciting. All right, we've had a couple of questions on Twitter. La Doctora asked about what's Gather. Gather.us, Gathr.us. It's Gather Us. It's a website that helps set up movie screenings in your community. They have Escape Fire, and I agree with Jeff. Escape Fire, if you haven't watched it, it is the best movie ever there's no patient that could watch that movie and at the end of it wouldn't want an integrative doctor. If you don't feel like you're a great speaker and you don't feel like you can close the room in a group of patients, let a 90-minute video that has been literally millions of dollars have been spent on it to achieve that same goal that you're trying to achieve, leverage that for it. All right, any questions here in the audience? I've got a couple other coming in on Twitter, but I just want to see if anyone wants to pick these guys' brains while they're live on stage. Joel, maybe I can come to you again with, this is the evolution of cardiology. Where do you see, how do you see, let's just say, the kind of support group that you've created here in Detroit, 3,400 people, was able to be replicated in other communities. Who's the best person to stimulate that replication in the community? And what were some of the things that you've learned along the way to make that happen as quickly and efficiently as possible?
Yeah, it absolutely can be duplicated. I didn't even have time to talk. Again, I give all the credit to Paul Chatlin, who I think is still sitting a few feet on the other side of the road. But we actually now have medical school nutrition curriculums that are being proposed to our local medical schools in the greater area, something that could fundamentally change the way the next generation of physicians are going to handle, one of the most important parts of patients' life is the incredible knowledge about the way they eat, so they don't have to depend on USA Today and other media outlets that'll shift the message every time. So that's important. It really doesn't take much. It takes passion, like everything else in life. It takes drive. And it takes a drive to want to change and add the message. And I think it's at two people. It probably should involve some medically credible person, because we were actually thrown out of one of the hospitals after 2 meetings, viewed as a seditious group that was talking about nutrition. The idea that broccoli beats bypass was viewed as a the stay was, we haven't had your message approved by our nutrition committee and you'll have to leave. Fortunately, we moved into a larger high school auditorium. But so there are challenges in having a physician, an osteopath, a chiropractor, maybe a well-respected dietitian, all would be important. And then somebody with the drive to just, the idea of this movie might have been a great kickoff. I didn't know about, that opportunity, but just somehow, whether it's a couple TV shows, a local newspaper, a forum, getting the word out that we're people interested in, grassroots, food is medicine, healing, and social support. People will come out of the woodwork just like they do for almost any integrative approach once they know it's available. So, and it's needed in every community. It is amazing how this has bonded so many people in their kitchens, in their living rooms, in high school auditoriums, and other places, made friendships for life. So it's needed badly, and it's not available in hospitals.
It's really interesting you say that, because one of the things that we're seeing with the meetup groups now is that instead of watching the whole hour-and-a-half show, the practitioner meetup groups will watch like a piece of the show, and then they really focus the time in on speaking with each other. And I just came up with this on the spot, but I'm going to throw it out there because that's the kind of thing I do. I'm just going to throw it out there to the community and just say, look, what if each one of our functional forum practitioner communities could get together and start to build a patient group? I mean, what you're talking about is people working together to build a group of patients that are interested in this type of care. Talk about reducing the cost of acquisition. Charlie, I know, we've spoken about this before. Maybe you could just tell the story, because I love this story about the group of chiropractors was it in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who sort of were able to increase the number of people who just did chiropractic by working together.
Years ago, when I was back in the old model, and my background was chiropractic before I got into functional medicine, there was a management group that I belonged to called Pinnacle at the time, and they were some classy guys, and they ran things well, but they asked me to come to Wichita, be part of their group. I'm sorry, Tulsa.
Is it Tulsa?
No, Tulsa. You're right.
Okay.
Yeah, they asked me to come to Tulsa, and at the time, I wasn't practicing there, and my question was, I said, Steve, you guys have so many chiropractors here. Why do you want more? In fact, you've got a street. I think it was called Harvard, but everyone in town knew it as Chiropractic Boulevard. There was literally, I don't know, there had to have been 30 chiropractors or so. It was crazy. They're all over the place. And he says, let me tell you something. Here's what you don't understand. He says, there's so many good chiropractors, good integrity, doing things right and helping people, that the word's gotten out that you should have a chiropractor as one of your primary doctors. Had just gotten them. So instead of the average at the time, maybe 7 to 9% of the population using chiropractors, they were triple that, or who knows what it was. And they said the more we get, the busier we get. So the whole idea that those of us that want to practice in a proactive way, a functional way, thinking there's competition. The competition is drug companies. The competition is insurance. It's not other doctors trying to help people in the same way. And so the more people in your community that are actually putting out the same message, pretty soon people start hearing it, and all of a sudden you're not quacks anymore. You're actually presenting to them the truth, and it gets out, and people's results, referrals get up. So the more people you can gather around you practice in the same way, the better you're going to do in practice.
I'm really glad that you shared that story, Charlie. And so for all the meetup groups out there, here's your chance. Build your practitioner meetup group, and let's have a project to work together to build a massive database of patients locally, or potential patients, or people who are just interested in health creation. That is the way that it can spread, and I really appreciate all of your thoughts. I see with all the work you're doing, it's all based around community. There's a community of people's mouths, right? We've seen there's a community of people that you're working with. Jeff's built his community. It's all about community. All of these practitioners are building it in their own way, and to me, that is the evolution of cardiology. So if you're watching this show and you're fired up about doing a meetup, if you're watching at home, if you're socially isolated, chilling at home, you should reach out. Just 2 people could be a community, a group of practitioners watching the show together. Go to meetup.functionalforum.com. You can register a meetup. We've got tons of resources to make it easy for you to build that meetup and share it. We've got some really, really exciting functional forums next year. So next month, April 3rd, it's called the Evolution 2 Environmental Medicine. It's going to be it's only going to be an hour to really facilitate. It's all clinical, so it's all a clinical forum. There's no practice management, but we're really going to get the practitioner groups at home to really think about how to create effective structures to educate and provide detoxification services for the community. So check that out. That's April 3rd. Very also excited to announce that our International Functional Forum, hosted by Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, its second episode is the next night. So you got 2 forums within a 24-hour period. I'm actually going to be in Australia and not involved with either of them, which is pretty awesome. I've been doing this for 3.5 years, the first 2 that I'm going to miss. But this is happening at the Royal Society of Medicine in London. It's hosted by Dr. Chatterjee. That's at 7 p.m. UK time, so 2 p.m. Eastern time, 11 a.m. Pacific the very next day. So there's 2 forums within 2 years. Really cool. We've seen so many practitioners coming from Europe and Africa, really because they're able to watch the functional forum on their own time zone. So that's April 4th, coming from the Royal Society of Medicine in London. A warm thank you to all the guests and everyone for coming out. It's been an amazing functional forum. Thank you so much for your attendance, and we'll see you next time.